This is Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit, and today I'm going to talk about balance. And we hear about balance in artwork, but what is it really? What is it we're talking about when we're talking about balance? And especially if you're creating a work of art, because you can have balance at any point in your process of creating a painting, but it might not actually be that interesting at a particular point. And what got me thinking about this was yesterday I was working on a still life of that plant that I was doing in yesterday's painting, and at the end of the timer, I actually accidentally set my timer for 19 minutes instead of the 14 that I usually set it at, so yesterday went kind of long, and so I must have gotten more into this painting than I typically do, and so at the end of it I said, I think I might actually work on this a little bit more, and I did, and it started to get tighter, more refined, and I noticed it was also starting to kind of lose some life and energy. And so in the past, I might have gotten frustrated with myself and said, "Oh, jeez, you should have stopped. Why didn't you stop? You've ruined it." Well, I've gone through that enough to know that that's really not helpful. And maybe not, I wouldn't say always, because there are times where I've taken a painting to a point where there's just no return. But this painting definitely was not at that point. So because I was getting kind of tight with it and trying to maybe looking at the still life a little more. Actually, I think I took it away from the still life. So maybe I was getting a little too into my head and not really, in that flow when you're just looking at something and responding to it and putting paint on the canvas and responding to it. Anyway, I noticed that I wasn't really in that state, so I just gently brought myself back into that state of mind, and the color started to get kind of interesting because I introduced some new colors to it, and I was pretty happy. Finished it within a few minutes after making that decision. And so what does this all have to do with balance? So it's kind of just talking there about the process of finding that point where the painting is complete. I'm sure many of you have probably, if you haven't played Jenga, I'm sure you're aware of what the game is. And if you're not, is you set up a bunch of blocks and a kind of a tower, and each person goes around or you go around the table, and each person pulls a block away and tries to keep the tower standing. And so when you first set it up, that tower is balanced, right? Yeah, it's not really the point of the game, is it? To say, oh, well, we got standing, it's balanced, and okay, we can all go home now. So, what is the point of the game? Well, I was thinking about that, and it appears to me it's basically following the flow of where the energy is around the table. So each person has their chance. You take your turn and try and find a way to keep that tower standing as you're removing the blocks, and it gets more and more interesting, and more tension builds. And then eventually it falls over and collapses. So what's really happening with balance is it's finding the place where the energy is. And you can have balance in chaos, and it can be pretty interesting, because it's just, like I said, just finding that point where the energy is. And what, I guess, let me kind of describe what I'm talking about with that, using a personal example that you might not have your own personal experience with, but I'll use it anyway because it's my personal experience. So I practice Tai Chi, and I've done that for 20 some years. And that's been quite a journey. Well, Tai Chi is all about balance. And just when you first start, or when I first started, you learn the form, and that takes quite a bit of practice to just get that drilled into your mind. Let's bring some yellow in here. Played with yellow. Anyway, it hasn't been till last few years, maybe even not even that I've come to really understand what balance is in a much different way than when I first started. When I first started, it was, kind of, you're trying to keep yourself balanced, and if you go a little too far this way, you're off balance, and you're kind of using your muscles, and you're told to relax, and you're kind of trying to get all this stuff to work, and it doesn't really actually quite work. I force it, and it doesn't work, and get frustrated, stop, and all that kind of stuff. And at some point, I really started to understand what it means to relax. Relax and let go. And why is that important with balance? Well, what I started to notice is in my mind, it's about energy too. When you're practicing Tai Chi, your mind basically is an energy. Well, you're transmitting energy with your mind. And it sounds kind of woo-woo to say that, but really it is. It's what's happening all the time. It's all the time. You're doing stuff with your mind, and there's an energy to that. So, what is it about relaxing? It seems to help in moving this chi, which is energy. And what I found is energy is always being moved around, moved around, moved around, moved around. And many of the times we're kind of jumping from one place to another with it, and it can get a little out of flow. Maybe you find yourself in a situation with your painting, and it just seems frustrated, and then you try and compensate, and then it just gets worse and whatever. Let's see here. I'm gonna do something a little bit different today. Let's just play with black. See what black does with this. Maybe I can go into the space a little bit. So what I found with Tai Chi is that the more I just became aware of where the energy is in my body, I could feel I needed to relax that point of my body, otherwise the energy stops flowing easily, naturally. And so it becomes this constant, just relaxing wherever the energy is, so you're allowing flow to happen, and that's where the balance is. And I think it's so similar to painting. And one of the reasons I do these daily, these painting spirit videos, is because repetition is really key. Repeating and repeating something so it just becomes natural, because what that does is it allows you to relax into what it is you're doing, letting go of the mind, and you can find that point of balance. It's so key to art. And we can talk a bit about genres of paint, or you've got impressionism and realism and all these kind of genres, and I was thinking a bit about that too. That has a lot to do with where energy is too, because you can see that particular movements in art, they start to lose energy. There's no longer energy in that particular movement, and then you get people who are used to it, and then you get artists who try to recreate that, and it doesn't seem to have the life anymore that it used to, because really the energy has gone someplace else. And that is true for us too on a personal level. We're all going to have our own unique place where our interests are in any particular moment, and just being aware of that and looking for it, finding where that energy is, that will bring a lot of depth to your work. It makes your painting interesting, and finding that balance within that. And this is kind of fun. I like this painting today. Seems like a little bit of a different approach that I use to it. So anyway, that was my rambling on balance. If you found it interesting, give me a thumbs up. I guess it's not a thumbs up anymore. It's a like, or I guess it is a thumbs up. Anyway, likes or hearts or comments. And get out your own brushes and see what you can find in the balance of your own energy. Until then, see you tomorrow.